The plate looked perfect, almost too perfect. Brianna Mitchell paused in the kitchen doorway of Azure Heights, the city's most expensive restaurant, while the heat lamps turned every sauce into a spotlight. Chef Pierre's hands moved with the calm precision of someone who believed beauty could prevent disaster. He finished the evening special like he was signing a painting. Dover sole, lemon butter sauce, asparagus tips, tiny purple flowers arranged like a delicate crown. Under the bright glare, the fish gleamed golden and clean. The asparagus stood upright, disciplined. The butter swirled in thin ribbons that caught the light. Everything looked exactly as it should. And yet, Brianna felt her stomach tighten. Her grandmother used to say, "Food tells you its secrets if you pay attention." Most people looked at a plate and saw dinner. Brianna saw patterns, small warnings hiding inside pretty things. Tonight, the warnings came fast. The purple flowers were darker than they should have been, not vivid and fresh, but bruised at the edges. The petals looked slightly curled, a touch too crisp, like they had kissed heat they were never meant to touch. Then the scent hit her. At first it was only lemon and butter, bright and safe. But riding the steam was something else, thin and sharp, almost medicinal, acrid, not bitter like burnt herbs, bitter like a warning that didn't belong near food. It caught in the back of her nose, the way metal did when it got hot. Brianna's fingers went cold against the doorframe. Pierre didn't look up. He was already plating with the confidence of a man who never doubted his own kitchen. "Table 7, ready to go," Pierre called out, sliding the plate onto the service station. "Table 7. Brianna's pulse jumped hard enough to feel in her throat. Table 7 was the private dining room at the back, the one separated by frosted glass doors and guarded like a vault. 20 minutes ago, a man in a gray suit had arrived with 2 bodyguards and the kind of credit card that made managers suddenly speak softer. Andrew Bennett, Billionaire CEO, face in business magazines, name whispered with admiration and fear. The kind of man who could buy a building with the same casualness most people bought dinner. And someone, somewhere in this kitchen, had just tried to feed him something that did not belong on a plate. Brianna's mind tried to argue with itself. Maybe she was wrong. Maybe the flowers were just wilted. Maybe the scent was just a trick of heat and oil. But her grandmother's voice rose in her head, clear as if she were standing beside her. "If something feels wrong, it is wrong. Don't wait for permission to be careful." Brianna moved before she could talk herself out of it. She reached for another plate on the warming station, an identical order prepared for table 9. Her hands were steady even as her heart hammered. In one smooth motion, she swapped them. The suspicious plate slid to the side. The safe plate landed where Pierre expected it. Chef Pierre's head snapped up. "Brianna, what are you doing?" His eyes flicked to the asparagus. His mouth tightened. Table 9 asked for no asparagus. Brianna's chest burned with the effort of keeping her face neutral. The kitchen was loud with clinking pans and hissing burners, but in her body everything went quiet, like standing too close to a storm. She met Pierre's gaze and lied without blinking. "Table 7 asked for no asparagus," she said, voice calm, almost bored. Pierre's expression twisted, offended, and suspicious. But the service window was a ticking clock. Tickets piled. Servers waited. The dining room didn't care about his pride. Brianna didn't wait for permission. She lifted the tray and walked. The swinging doors opened and closed behind her with a soft thud. The dining room air hit her cooler, perfumed with expensive wine and polished wood. Her red uniform dress swished against her legs with each step, a bright streak moving toward the back like a warning light no one noticed. The private dining room sat behind frosted glass. Through the blur she could make out a single man seated alone, shoulders slightly hunched, phone in hand. A bodyguard stood outside the door like a statue, eyes cold and assessing. Another waited just inside. Brianna kept her posture straight and her expression blank. Every instinct in her screamed to run, but her feet stayed steady. She stopped in front of the door. The guard's gaze dropped to her hands, her tray, her face, as if he expected her to pull a weapon from a linen napkin. "Dinner for Mr. Bennett," Brianna said quietly. One bodyguard opened the door. The other watched her enter like she might explode. Inside, the room was quieter than the rest of the restaurant, insulated from laughter and clatter. The table was set for one, linen crisp enough to cut, silverware aligned like rules. A single candle burned low, throwing warm light across a man who looked younger than she expected. Late 30s, maybe. Dark hair, a watch that didn't beg for attention but still looked like it could pay her rent for a year. His face held shadows under the eyes that money didn't erase. Andrew Bennett looked up as Brianna approached, but only for a second. His attention returned to his phone as if the world was a list of problems he was too tired to solve. "Your Dover sole, sir," Brianna said, setting the plate down with careful hands. He nodded. Barely looked at the food. Barely looked at her. Brianna should have left. That was the job. Deliver. Smile. Disappear. But her throat felt tight with the weight of what she had just done. If she was wrong, she had stolen a billionaire's dinner and lied to the head chef. If she was right, she had just stepped between a man and a slow, invisible death. She heard herself speak before she could stop it. "Sir," she said, soft enough to stay private. "I apologize for the interruption." Andrew's eyes lifted again, sharper now, as if he wasn't used to being addressed like a person. "I noticed you've been coming here for several months," Brianna continued. Her voice stayed steady, but she felt her pulse in her fingertips. "We appreciate your patronage, and if there's ever anything we can do to make your experience better, please let us know." It was a simple line, something servers said every night, but she needed him to look at her, needed him to register her face, her name, her existence, in case she had to speak up later. For a moment, his gaze held hers. Tired eyes meeting tired eyes. Something unreadable passed between them. Not warmth, not suspicion, just a brief recognition that two human beings were sharing the same air. "Thank you," Andrew said quietly. "I'll remember that." Brianna nodded once and backed away, keeping her hands visible, keeping her breathing controlled. The bodyguards watched her exit like she had left something behind. Out in the hallway, the restaurant noise rushed back in. Plates clinked, glasses chimed. A waiter laughed too loudly near the bar. Brianna's legs carried her toward the kitchen, but her mind stayed locked on the private dining room, on the plate she had taken away, on the faint, acrid warning hiding under butter. The service door swung open again, and the heat hit her face like an accusation. Pierre's stare followed her as she returned, but she didn't slow down. Not now. Tonight, she had done the one thing she was never paid to do. She had paid attention. Brianna found the plate exactly where she had left it. It sat on the stainless service counter like it belonged there, untouched, unclaimed, still wearing its perfect little lie. The lemon butter had started to settle, losing its glossy swirl. The asparagus looked the same. The purple flowers still held their dark, crisp edges, too pretty to be trusted. No one had noticed. No one had asked where Table 7's original plate went. The kitchen kept moving around it. Pans hissed. A ticket printer chattered. Someone dropped a spoon and cursed under their breath. Chef Pierre barked times and temperatures, voice sharp with control. Brianna's pulse slowed enough for her hands to feel heavy. That was worse, in a way. The moment she stopped running on adrenaline, Her thoughts began to crowd in. If she was wrong, she had just committed a fireable offense. If she was right, she had just stolen a murder attempt off a tray, and nobody even blinked. She forced her face into its normal shape and lifted the suspicious plate with both hands, careful not to tilt it, careful not to smear anything. The porcelain was warm against her palms, heat seeping into her skin. She carried it toward the back service area, where the scraped plates waited to be stripped and washed and forgotten. The dish pit was louder than the dining room. Water roared. Plates clattered into stacks. The air tasted like steam and detergent and overcooked onions. Brianna paused beside the trash bin, where servers scraped leftovers into a wet mess. She stood close enough to feel the splash of heat rising off the sink, close enough that nobody would question her being there. Instead of scraping, she slid her phone from her apron pocket. Her screen lit her hands in a pale rectangle. She held the plate steady and took photos like she was building a case. Straight down, angled from the side, close enough to capture the flour edges, close enough to catch the sheen of sauce and the way the petals curled. Not from natural dryness, but from exposure to heat they shouldn't have survived. The camera's quiet click felt loud in her head. She took one more shot, then another, her thumb moving without hesitation. The faster she gathered proof, the less she had to rely on the feeling in her gut. Her stomach tightened when she thought about that gut feeling being all she had. Brianna glanced over her shoulder. A dishwasher shoved a stack of plates into the rack without looking up. A server walked past her with empty hands, already thinking about the next table. Nobody cared about one more plate in the chaos. Brianna breathed through her nose. The lemon butter smell was still there, but when she leaned in close, that thin, sharp edge rose again beneath it. Not something meant to be eaten, something meant to slip past attention. Her grandmother's garden came back to her in flashes. Dirt under fingernails. The sound of bees. Her grandmother's voice low and firm as she pointed at certain flowers. Beautiful doesn't mean safe. Brianna's fingers moved to the garnish. She didn't pick the flowers up bare-handed. She used the edge of a folded napkin, careful, like she was handling something that could bite. The petals felt papery through the fabric, too dry, too brittle. She lifted them off the fish and wrapped them inside the napkin, folding it tight, then tighter. She tucked the bundle into a small plastic bag she used for pens and spare hair ties, sealed it as best she could, and slid it deep into her apron pocket. The plate looked harmless, without its purple crown. That almost made her angrier. She carried the rest to the scrape bin and did what she was supposed to do. Sauce into the trash, fish into the trash, asparagus into the trash. Her motions were efficient, practiced, invisible. The plate clinked into the stack like it was any other plate, but her pocket felt heavier than it should have. The rest of the shift ran on muscle memory. Brianna poured water and wine and coffee. She smiled at couples, celebrating anniversaries and businessmen pretending not to check their phones. She apologized for delays she couldn't control. She listened to complaints about room temperature and lighting, and the wrong kind of sparkling water. She moved through the dining room like she wasn't carrying a secret. Every so often, her gaze drifted toward the frosted glass doors of the private dining room, as if she could see through them with willpower alone. She told herself not to stare, told herself to act normal, and yet, every time she passed near the hallway, she listened for any sign of trouble. A sudden shout, a bodyguard's bark, a chair scraping too hard. Nothing came. No ambulance, no commotion, no manager sprinting with panic on their face. Andrew Bennett finished his meal and stayed alive. That should have been enough to settle her. But it didn't, because it meant one more thing was true. Whoever had done this expected it to work quietly. They expected him to feel sick later, maybe on the drive home, maybe an hour after leaving. They expected it to look like stress, like exhaustion, like his own body failing him. The thought made Brianna's mouth go dry. At 11, she clocked out. Her feet ached from 8 hours in heels. Her shoulders felt bruised from trays. She walked through the employee hallway toward the exit, the fluorescent lights making everything look flatter, cheaper, more real. A door shut somewhere behind her. A soft thud. Brianna Mitchell. Her name landed in the hallway like a dropped knife. She turned. Andrew Bennett stood there in a gray suit, bodyguards flanking him. Up close, he looked sharper than he had at the table, the tiredness still present, but contained behind posture and money. His eyes pinned her with a focus that made her feel like she couldn't hide inside her uniform. "Mr. Bennett," she said, voice careful. "Can I help you?" He studied her face as if measuring distance between what he knew and what he suspected. "That's an interesting question," he said, calm as glass. "Because I think you already did." Her throat tightened. She kept her hands visible, empty. She was painfully aware of the small bag hidden in her pocket. Andrew stepped closer, just enough that the hallway air between them felt thinner. "I've been eating here twice a week," he said quietly. "For months. Same table, same order." One of the bodyguards shifted, watching her hands the way they had in the dining room. "Tonight," Andrew continued, "for the first time in a long time, I felt fine." His eyes narrowed, not accusing, but searching. "No nausea," he said. "No headache. No crash. An hour later that hits me like a truck." Brianna's heart kicked hard. The pattern sounded too specific to be imagined. Andrew held her gaze. "What did you do to my food?" For a moment, every answer felt dangerous. Lie, and she might lose the chance to stop this the right way. Tell the truth. And she might put herself in the path of whoever had done it. Brianna inhaled slowly. The hallway smelled like mop water and stale bread. Her pulse sounded loud in her ears. "I switched your plate," she said. The words left her mouth clean and simple, like a confession and a warning at the same time. Andrew's expression didn't change, but something in his eyes sharpened. "The original one," she added, "had something wrong with it. I couldn't let you eat it." A silence stretched long enough for Brianna to hear the distant hum of refrigerators from the kitchen. One bodyguard's hand drifted toward his jacket, then stopped when Andrew lifted two fingers, subtle and absolute. Andrew didn't look away from Brianna. "Why?" he asked. Brianna felt the folded plastic bag in her pocket, a small, hard shape against her hip. "Because the flowers were wrong," she said. "And the smell didn't belong." Andrew's jaw tightened slightly. "You're sure?" "I'm sure enough that I couldn't stand there and do nothing." Andrew stared at her like he was trying to decide if she was brave or reckless, or both. Then he reached into his wallet and pulled out a business card. The paper was thick, expensive, clean. He held it out. "I need to talk to you," he said. "Not here." Brianna didn't take it yet. Her fingers hovered, uncertain. His voice softened. Not pleading, but stripped down to something human. "Tomorrow morning," he said. "If you're willing." Brianna's eyes dropped to the card and then back up to him. "Why would you want to talk to me?" she asked. Andrew's gaze didn't flinch. "Because either you just saved my life," he said, "or you're involved in trying to end it." He exhaled, a controlled release, like he was tired of holding himself upright. "And I need to know which one." Brianna's hand finally closed around the card. The edges were crisp under her thumb. His name was printed in black, simple and confident. A phone number, an email address. She felt the plastic bag of flowers press against her pocket like a second heartbeat. 8 o'clock, Andrew said. "Morning brew on 5th Street. Public. Safe." He paused, as if remembering something most people never offered him. Bring someone with you, he added. If you want. Brianna didn't nod too fast. She didn't smile. I'll be there, she said. Andrew held her gaze one last time, then turned. The bodyguards followed him, their footsteps measured and quiet, and the back door closed with a firm click that sounded like a seal. Brianna stood alone in the hallway, staring at the card until the words blurred. When she finally moved, she didn't head back toward the kitchen. She headed out into the night, the city air cooler on her face, the card in her hand and poison in her pocket. At home, the apartment was dim and cramped and familiar. Tyler was asleep on the couch, textbooks open like fallen wings around him. Brianna pulled a blanket over his shoulders and watched his chest rise and fall, steady and unaware. Then she went to her room and sat at her small desk. The plastic bag lay on the wood like it didn't belong in a place this ordinary. The purple petals looked even darker under her lamp. Brianna opened her laptop and typed the first search. Purple flowers garnish poisonous. Images loaded, some harmless, some decorative, some close, but wrong. She clicked and compared, her eyes flicking between screen and memory, her stomach tightening every time a petal shape almost matched. Minutes stretched into an hour. Then she found it, a photo of a delicate purple flower that looked like it had been painted by someone who wanted to trick you into touching it. The same hooded shape, the same deep color, the same quiet threat disguised as beauty. The name beside it made her breath catch. Monkshood, Wolf's Bane, one of the most poisonous plants in the world. Brianna stared at the screen until the words felt carved into her brain. Symptoms listed in neat bullet points: nausea, weakness, irregular heartbeat, the kind of slow damage that could be mistaken for stress, grief, overwork. Her hands started to shake. Somewhere across the city, a billionaire thought he was sick for no reason, and someone had been feeding him the reason, twice a week, hiding it under butter and lemon and flowers that looked like art. Morning Brew was the kind of coffee shop that smelled honest, not syrup and whipped cream, but roasted beans and burnt sugar clinging to the air. Mismatched chairs scraped softly across old wood floors. A chalkboard menu leaned against the wall, smudged where too many hands had erased and rewritten. Brianna arrived early. She chose a table near the window where she could see the street and the reflection behind her, a habit that had never mattered until now. Her coffee sat untouched, steam thinning into nothing. In her bag, a folder of printed pages pressed against her ribs like armor. The small plastic bag with the purple flowers stayed buried deeper, zipped, sealed, double-checked. Her phone clock rolled toward 8. At exactly 8, a black car slid to the curb outside. Andrew Bennett stepped out wearing jeans and a dark jacket. No suit, no visible guards. He moved with the kind of control that made people turn their heads without knowing why. He glanced through the glass, saw her, and nodded, once small, deliberate, as if confirming she was real. Inside, he ordered at the counter like any other customer. The barista smiled too wide, hands suddenly careful with the cup. Andrew paid without looking at the total. Then he crossed the room and sat across from Brianna. Up close, his eyes looked less tired and more sharpened by months of trying to solve a problem his money couldn't buy. The skin under them carried a faint shadow, like sleep had become optional. "Thank you for coming," he said. His voice was quiet, but the room around them still felt louder, like other people's lives were happening too close. Brianna kept her hands on the table, open, visible. "You said it was public and safe." "It is." His gaze flicked briefly to the window, then back. "Still, people don't always show up when I ask." He said it like he was used to either obedience or avoidance. not cooperation. Brianna didn't smile. You said please. A small pause. The corner of his mouth lifted. Not amusement, more like surprise at being met with something honest. I don't hear that word much, he said. Please. Mostly people tell me what I want to hear. I'm not most people. His eyes held hers. I'm starting to understand that. The warmth in that sentence lasted less than a second before his expression tightened again. Tell me what you saw, he said. Everything. Brianna opened the folder and slid it toward him, but she didn't let him read yet. She wanted him listening first, seeing it through her senses, not just text. She described the plate. The flowers darker than fresh garnish should be. The crisped edges, like they'd been heat-kissed. The steam carrying a thin, acrid bite that didn't belong under lemon butter. Andrew didn't interrupt. He watched her mouth when she spoke, like he needed to verify each word was coming from a place he could trust. When she finished, he exhaled slowly, controlled. You think someone is poisoning me, he said. I think someone is poisoning you, Brianna corrected, voice steady. Whether it's the restaurant or someone before it gets to you, I can't prove. But the pattern you described last night, feeling fine for the first time, matches what I found after I got home. Andrew's jaw tightened. What did you find? Brianna flipped the folder open to the printed images and highlighted lines. She pulled the small plastic bag from her bag and placed it on the table like it was a live thing. The purple flowers looked harmless behind plastic. That was the point. That was how they got past everyone. Andrew's gaze locked on them. His hand didn't reach out immediately, like he knew instinctively that touching them meant admitting something. Brianna tapped the top page with one finger. Monkshood, she said, also called wolf's bane, one of the most poisonous plants in the world. Andrew's eyes lifted, sharp. In small doses over time, it causes nausea, weakness, irregular heartbeat. Brianna kept her voice even, but her fingers pressed hard into the paper. It can look like stress, grief, burnout, the kind of sickness that never quite becomes a diagnosis. Andrew stared at the bag again. Something in his face went still, the way people look when the worst theory finally becomes the only one that fits. How long? He said. Have I been eating at Azure Heights? Brianna didn't answer. She waited. She needed the timeline from him. Clean. 6 months, Andrew said after a beat. Maybe 7. He looked down at his hands, then back up. His fingers curled loosely around the edge of his coffee cup without lifting it. I started going there after my wife died, he added, as if the words tasted like iron. Brianna's chest tightened. She didn't soften her gaze, but her voice lowered. You order the same thing. Almost always, he said. The Dover Soul. Private room. Quiet. No questions. And you started feeling sick when? Andrew's throat moved as he swallowed. 4 months. Maybe 5. He let out a humorless breath. My doctor ran every test. His eyes flashed. Anger kept on a leash. Everything came back normal. He said, I was working too hard, that I needed rest. Brianna didn't look away. You can prove it now. Andrew's gaze sharpened again. How? Get those flowers tested, Brianna said, and get your blood tested. If I'm right, they'll find traces. You'll have proof that doesn't rely on anyone's opinion. He nodded once. Slow. Then he looked at her. Really looked at her, as if seeing the full shape of what she had done by noticing one detail. I will, he said. But that's not enough. His voice dropped. I need to know who and why. Brianna's coffee had gone cold, but she wrapped her hands around it anyway, needing something solid. Do you have enemies? She asked. Andrew's laugh came out flat. I run a company that moves billions. I make decisions that cost people money, jobs, power. His gaze stayed steady. Of course I have enemies. Brianna's mind raced through the kitchen at Azure Heights, the service station, the untouched plate. Someone close enough to your routines to dose you over time, she said. Andrew's eyes narrowed. Which means I can't trust the people around me. A heavy silence settled between them. Outside the window, a bicyclist passed, carefree, headphones in, as if the world hadn't suddenly become sharper. Andrew set his coffee down with care. I need help, he said. The words were simple, but they landed like a crack in something expensive. I'm hiring a private investigator, he continued. I'm getting the tests done. I'll do everything the right way. Then he leaned forward slightly, lowering his voice, so even the coffee shop noise couldn't carry it. But I need someone who can see what others miss. Someone who can watch my food everywhere, before it gets to me. Brianna's throat tightened. Me? She said. You, Andrew confirmed. I'll pay you. Whatever you make at the restaurant, I'll triple it. Brianna's first instinct was to refuse. She wasn't trained for security. She wasn't a scientist. She was a waitress who had grown up listening to a grandmother who knew plants the way other people knew prayers. But her mind flashed to Tyler's textbooks. Rent, the faucet that wouldn't stop dripping, the cold months when the heater barely worked, the way she measured life in shifts and tips and small compromises. And then there was the other truth. Quieter, but heavier. Someone had been feeding poison to a man who sat alone, grieving, thinking he was just failing at life. Brianna inhaled. Slow. I'll do it, she said. Andrew didn't react at first, like he needed to hear it twice. Then his shoulders eased a fraction, the smallest release. Brianna raised one finger. I have conditions. Name them. 1, she said. I'm not moving anywhere. I have a brother. I have responsibilities. I keep my apartment. Agreed. 2, Brianna continued. If I say something is wrong with food, you listen. No argument in the moment. We can talk after. But when I say don't eat, you don't eat. Andrew nodded. Agreed. 3, Brianna said, the words firm even as her heart thumped. When we catch whoever is doing this, I'm done. I go back to my life. This isn't permanent. Andrew's gaze held hers. A pause. Agreed, he said. Then, quieter. Though I hope you'll consider staying on in some capacity. I don't find trust easily. Brianna didn't answer that. Andrew reached into his pocket and pulled out a checkbook, the kind Brianna had only seen in movies. His pen scratched across paper. He tore the check cleanly and slid it across the table. Brianna's eyes dropped. $10,000. Her name printed on the line like it belonged there. That's for saying yes, Andrew said. And for last night, Brianna's breath caught. 10,000 could change the next 6 months of her life, could change Tyler's semester, could fix the heater and still leave enough to breathe. Her voice snagged. She forced it steady. Thank you. Don't thank me yet, Andrew said, and his tone sharpened. This job might be dangerous. Brianna's fingers curled around the edge of the check, careful, as if touching it too hard would turn it to ash. If someone has been trying to kill me quietly, he continued, they won't stop, because you interrupted them once. Brianna met his gaze. I understand. Andrew studied her for a moment, then reached into his wallet again and pulled out a business card, different from the one he'd given her in the hallway. This one looked like it had been printed for a boardroom, not a restaurant. He set it on the table between them. My direct number, he said. Text me yours. Brianna gave it. Her phone buzzed almost immediately. 2 words appeared on the screen. Thank you. Brianna stared at them. The simplicity of it, the weight behind it. Andrew stood, taking his coffee with him. I'll message you a schedule by tonight, he said. Starting tomorrow, you're with me for every meal. Brianna folded the check carefully and slid it into her bag. Andrew paused as if deciding whether to say the next part. Be careful, he said finally. If someone is watching me, they might start watching you. A chill traced up Brianna's spine, but she didn't let it reach her face. I'll be careful, she said. Andrew nodded once, then walked out into the morning light, blending into the street like a man trying to look ordinary while carrying a target no one could see. Brianna stayed seated, staring at the check and the bag of purple flowers in her bag, feeling the moment settle over her. She had stepped into something dangerous, and she had said yes. 3 days later, the elevator doors opened onto a floor that didn't feel like it belonged to Brianna Mitchell. Everything up there smelled like antiseptic and money. The hallway carpet muted footsteps. The walls were pale and clean, like they had never absorbed anyone's panic. A receptionist behind glass spoke in a soft voice, eyes flicking to Andrew Bennett, the way people looked at storms through windows. Brianna stayed close, but not too close, her posture calm, her senses working overtime. The plastic bag of flowers was inside a sealed evidence pouch now, the kind a lab used when it wanted to prove what touched what and when. The seal strip was smooth under her thumb, printed with a tiny line for signatures. Andrew sat in a chair while a nurse tightened a band around his arm. He watched the needle slide in without flinching, but Brianna saw the tension in his jaw. He could handle pain. What he couldn't handle was uncertainty. The nurse filled vial after vial, dark red rising through clear tubes. Each one received a label. Each label was pressed down with a firm finger, as if pressure could make it more real. An older doctor entered, gray hair pinned back, eyes sharp without being cold. She introduced herself as Dr. Reeves and reached for the evidence pouch. Chain of custody, she said. Matter of fact. She wrote her name on the line, then stamped the paper receipt with a heavy, satisfying thump. The ink was fresh and dark. Brianna watched the stamp leave its mark, watched the doctor slide the pouch into a locked drawer. What do you think? Andrew asked, voice calm like he was ordering coffee. Dr. Reeves didn't answer like she was guessing. She answered like she had seen this story before. Based on the plant sample and your reported symptoms, she said, it fits. This toxin is designed to hide. It mimics other conditions, stress, flu, heart issues. It makes people doubt themselves until they collapse. Brianna's stomach tightened, as if her body understood the word collapse better than her mind wanted to. Andrew's gaze stayed on Dr. Reeves. How long until results? Basic screening soon, she said. Full analysis takes longer. But you're lucky. Brianna shifted uncomfortably at the word lucky. Dr. Reeves turned her eyes to Brianna, direct and steady. Most people wouldn't have noticed. Fewer would have acted. Brianna held the doctor's gaze, feeling the weight of that sentence settle into her shoulders. After the appointment, Andrew didn't drive straight home. He took Brianna to lunch, but not anywhere that felt like a private room behind frosted glass. This place was a small bistro across town, with an open kitchen and a counter where you could see everything sizzling and flipping in plain sight. The air smelled like grilled lemon and hot oil. The clatter of pans was honest noise. Andrew chose a table on the patio where Brianna could see the kitchen door and the server station. He sat with his back to a wall, an old habit, wearing a new reason. You don't have to check the food here, Andrew said, trying for lightness. Brianna's eyes still tracked the server's hands when the plates came out. Her fork stayed still until she watched the cook plate both meals under the kitchen lights. Habit, she admitted. Andrew's mouth lifted slightly. It wasn't a full smile, but it was the first time he looked like he could imagine one. They ate in silence for a few minutes. The food was simple: chicken for her, salmon for him. No garnish, no purple anything, just clean flavors and hot plates. Then Andrew set his fork down with care. "I want to hire you for more than checking food," he said. Brianna paused mid-bite. Her fingers tightened around her fork. "I'm not a detective," she said. Andrew leaned forward a little, lowering his voice without making the moment dramatic. "No, but you notice things. You see patterns that other people walk past." Brianna watched his face as he spoke. The tiredness was still there, but now it had direction, like exhaustion sharpened into intent. "I hired a private investigator," he continued. "Robert Chin, former federal, good at records, surveillance, pulling threads." Brianna pictured someone with folders and cameras and quiet patience. "But he doesn't know my life," Andrew said. "He doesn't know which smiles are real and which are rehearsed. I do, and I need someone close enough to watch without being expected to." Brianna understood the shape of what he was asking before he said it out loud. "You want me to observe your people," she said. "I want you to observe," Andrew corrected. "Not accuse, just watch. The way you watched that plate." Brianna's coffee sat cooling beside her. She wrapped her fingers around the cup anyway, anchoring herself to something warm. "Who do you suspect?" she asked. Andrew's gaze drifted to the street beyond the patio fence, where strangers walked past carrying ordinary lives. "I don't know," he said. "And that's the problem." He breathed out slowly, then listed names like he was reading from a file he hated. "Todd Harrison," he said. "My business partner. If I die, my shares shift. My influence disappears." Brianna watched his face for any flicker. There was none. He wasn't accusing. He was mapping. "Lauren Webb," Andrew continued. "My executive assistant. 8 years. She knows my schedule, my habits, what I eat, where I go." Brianna's mind flashed to hands moving through calendars, to someone who could make small changes without anyone noticing. "And Jeff Coleman," Andrew said. "Head of security, responsible for keeping me safe." Brianna's chest tightened. "Security," she repeated quietly. "That's access." Andrew nodded once. "What about family?" Brianna asked. Andrew's face closed off like a door. "Not much family left. My parents are gone." He hesitated, then said the name like it tasted bitter. "My wife had a brother. Richard. Carter." "Richard." Brianna watched Andrew's fingers curl lightly against the table edge. "We haven't spoken since the funeral," Andrew said. "He blamed me for her death." Brianna's breath slowed. "Why?" "Because I was working when she collapsed," Andrew said. His voice stayed flat, but something raw hid beneath it. "I was in a meeting instead of at home." Brianna's stomach turned at how familiar guilt could sound. "Does he live here?" she asked. "California," Andrew said. "Across the country?" Brianna's mind moved fast, connecting distance with possibility. "Distance doesn't mean no involvement," she said carefully. "It means he would need help." Andrew's eyes snapped to hers, sharper now. "That's what Chin said," he admitted. "He's looking into it." Brianna sat back slightly, feeling the patio air on her face, trying to keep her thoughts from sprinting ahead of evidence. Andrew's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, then looked back at her. "I have a dinner tomorrow night," he said. "Small, inner circle, at my estate." Brianna's pulse tightened. "Yes," Andrew said. "Officially, you're my food consultant. Unofficially, you're watching." Brianna pictured a long table, polished glass, people smiling too easily. She pictured hands near plates, wine poured a little too carefully. Andrew's gaze held hers. If you want to back out, I'll understand. Brianna thought of her brother studying under weak apartment lights. She thought of the check, sitting in her bag like a door that had opened. She thought of Andrew sitting alone for months, getting weaker while nobody noticed. I'm not backing out, she said. Andrew's shoulders eased, just a fraction. On the drive to her building, his driver said little. The city slid past the window in soft blur. Brianna's reflection stared back at her, eyes more alert than they had been a week ago. When the car stopped, Andrew walked her to the entrance. I'll have something sent over for tomorrow, he said. Business formal, comfortable. Brianna frowned. I have clothes. I know, Andrew said, but those people judge by appearance. I want them to take you seriously. He hesitated, and the word came again, stripped of power and full of need. Please, he said. Brianna nodded once. Fine, but I need to be able to move. Understood, Andrew said. He stepped back, his gaze steady but tired. Be careful, he added. Whoever did this has been getting away with it for months. Brianna watched him return to the car, watched the door close, watched the vehicle pull away. Then she went upstairs to the apartment that still smelled like ramen and laundry detergent, where her brother's textbooks waited on the table like a reminder of why she couldn't afford to be careless. Tomorrow night, she would walk into a billionaire's home and sit down with people who had reasons to lie, and she would pay attention to everything. The dress arrived like a warning wrapped in courtesy, not in a cardboard box from a delivery service, but carried by a woman who introduced herself with a bright, polished smile and a clipboard held like a shield. Isabel, she said, stepping into Brianna's small living room as if she'd done it 1,000 times. Bennett asked me to make sure you're prepared. Behind her, a garment bag swung gently from her arm, the fabric whispering against the doorway. The hallway light caught a glimpse of smooth cloth and careful stitching before Isabel zipped it open. Tyler sat at the kitchen table with a highlighter in hand, frozen mid-study, watching the scene like a movie had wandered into their apartment. Brianna closed the door and tried to ignore how small her home felt with a stylist inside it. I don't need anything expensive, Brianna said. Isabel's smile didn't change. Business formal, comfortable, something you can move in. That was the instruction. She hung 3 options across the back of a chair, like she was displaying evidence. A maroon pantsuit with sharp lines, a green dress with sleeves that looked practical, a blue dress that somehow managed to look professional and soft at the same time. Tyler leaned back slightly, eyes widening. The blue one, he said immediately, like it wasn't even a question. Brianna gave him a look. You're not helping. You asked for my opinion, Tyler said, with the confidence of a younger brother who believed being right was a birthright. Brianna hadn't asked, but she didn't argue. Her attention kept catching on the way Isabel handled the clothes, careful and exact, as if wrinkling the fabric would be a crime. Isabel's eyes flicked to Brianna's face. Mr. Bennett specified blue or green. He said, those are your best colors. Brianna's stomach tightened a fraction. She didn't remember Andrew ever commenting on her clothes. She remembered him watching her like she was the only steady thing in a shifting room. When had he noticed something as small as color? Tyler smirked. Told you. Brianna took the blue dress into her room and changed. The fabric slid over her skin like water, fitted without trapping her. It fell just below her knees, clean and simple, expensive in a way that didn't need to announce itself. When she looked in the mirror, she saw herself as someone who belonged in rooms she'd never been allowed into. That was the most unsettling part. She looked like the version of herself other people had never made space for. Tyler appeared in the doorway, eyebrows raised. Okay, he said quietly. Yeah, that's the one. Brianna swallowed, fighting a strange tightness in her throat. It's just a dress. Tyler's expression softened. It's not just a dress. Brianna looked away, focusing on the seam of the sleeve, the way it lay perfectly flat. She could almost hear the drip of their broken faucet in the kitchen, steady and irritating, reminding her what her real life sounded like. Isabel made a few small adjustments, then stepped back, satisfied. You'll be taken seriously, she said. Taken seriously. Like that was a gift someone could hand you if the fabric was right. After Isabel left, Brianna hung the dress carefully and sat on the edge of her bed for a moment, listening to the apartment settle back into its usual sounds. Tyler's pages flipping, the refrigerator hum, a car passing outside. You're nervous, Tyler said, appearing at the doorway again. Quieter now, Brianna exhaled. I'm walking into a billionaire's house to sit with people who might be trying to kill him. Tyler blinked hard. When you say it like that, it sounds insane. It is insane, Brianna said. That's why I'm nervous. Tyler stepped closer, leaning against the doorframe. Do you want me to go with you? Brianna's chest warmed slightly. No, you have class tomorrow. And this isn't your world. Tyler's mouth tightened. It's your world now, apparently. Brianna didn't answer. She didn't know what her world was anymore. That evening, her phone buzzed with a text from Andrew. Pick up at 6. Phil will drive. Dinner at 7. The words were simple. Still, Brianna felt the weight behind them, like he was writing from a place of exhaustion he didn't want to show. She typed back one line. Understood. I'll be ready. At 6. A black car waited at the curb, like a quiet decision. Phil stepped out, opening the door with practiced ease. He was older than Andrew, with calm eyes, and the posture of someone who had spent years making sure problems never reached the person in the back seat. You look great, Phil said, not in a flirtatious way, but in the tone of someone offering reassurance. Brianna nodded once. Thanks. Phil glanced at her shoes. Practical enough to move in. Smart choice. The car interior smelled faintly of leather and something clean. The city rolled past the window, streetlights blinking on as dusk thickened into night. Brianna watched her reflection in the glass, trying to keep her face neutral, while her mind rehearsed everything she needed to notice. Hands near plates. Who touches what? Who watches whom? Who forces a smile? The estate gates rose after a code was entered, and the car glided onto a driveway that curved like it was designed to hide the house until the last possible moment. When the mansion finally appeared, it didn't look like a home. It looked like a statement carved out of glass and clean lines, with gardens trimmed so perfectly they felt artificial. Phil parked at the front. Andrew was already waiting at the door. He wore a dark suit that made him look like the man people expected him to be. But when he saw Brianna step out, his expression softened in a way money couldn't buy. You look beautiful, he said. Brianna's fingers tightened around her clutch. It's the dress. It's not the dress, Andrew said, as if he'd already decided that fact and didn't need to argue it. He gestured her inside. The house smelled faintly of citrus and polished wood. The lighting was warm but controlled, like the entire place had been curated to feel safe. Andrew didn't lead her straight to the dining room. He led her to the kitchen first. It was enormous, stainless steel and marble. A catering staff moved efficiently, quiet and focused, while one woman stood at the center like she owned every motion in the room. This is Marie, Andrew said, my chef. Marie was in her 50s, sharp eyes, confident hands. She looked Brianna over once, quick and assessing, then offered a firm handshake. "So you're the one who noticed?" Marie said. Brianna kept her grip steady. "I'm the one who didn't ignore it." Marie's mouth twitched, almost a smile. "Good." Andrew spoke low with Marie. A brief, serious exchange. Marie nodded once, then looked at Brianna again. "You'll have access," Marie said. "You can watch everything. Nothing leaves this kitchen that isn't safe." Relief loosened something in Brianna's chest. For the next hour, she stayed near the counters, watching ingredients unpacked and sliced and plated. She noted where everything came from, who handled which knives, who poured which sauces. The kitchen had cameras angled at the workstations, discreet but present. That felt intentional. At 7, the first guests arrived. Todd Harrison came in with the energy of a man who believed every room belonged to him. Tall, confident, a handshake that crushed slightly too hard. "So you're the consultant," Todd said, eyes scanning Brianna like he was evaluating a new acquisition. "Andrew's been talking about you." Brianna gave him a polite smile that revealed nothing. "Nice to meet you." "Call me Todd," he said, as if names were power he could grant. "We're all friends here." Lauren Webb arrived next, smooth and composed, blonde hair pulled back, expression professional enough to be worn like armor. Her smile was perfect and empty. "Brianna Mitchell," Lauren said, as if she'd memorized it off a file. "Andrew mentioned you'd be joining us." Her eyes flicked briefly over Brianna's dress, then to her shoes, then back up to her face. The assessment quick and practiced. "I hope that's all right," Lauren added, voice sweet in a way that felt sharpened. Brianna held her gaze. "Of course." Lauren's smile tightened a fraction. "Andrew's decisions are always sound." Then Jeff Coleman entered like a wall, moving through a doorway. Broad shoulders, military posture, eyes that never rested. He nodded once at Brianna, then looked to Andrew. "Perimeter's secure," he said. "No issues." The dining room table was long, set with immaculate precision. Windows overlooked the gardens, dark now, reflecting the room back at itself. Andrew took the head of the table. Todd sat to his right, Lauren to his left. Jeff took a seat near Todd. Brianna sat near Lauren, positioned so she could see everyone's hands and faces without turning her head too often. The first course arrived. Brianna watched Andrew's plate like she could will it to reveal secrets. Everything matched what she had seen in the kitchen. Everything looked clean. Todd started talking immediately, voice filling silence the way he filled contracts. Lauren barely touched her food, her attention drifting toward Andrew's face more than her plate. Jeff spoke little, but his eyes moved constantly, scanning corners like danger could appear between napkins. Brianna kept her expression neutral and her senses sharp. This wasn't just a dinner. It was a room full of people who had reasons to smile and reasons to lie. And Brianna could feel, like a low hum under the conversation, that someone at this table didn't want Andrew Bennett alive. Dinner moved like a performance no one admitted they were rehearsing. Silverware clicked against porcelain in clean, polite rhythms. Candlelight softened faces without warming them. Outside the windows, the garden was a dark mirror, reflecting the table back at itself like the house wanted everyone to watch themselves. Brianna kept her posture relaxed and her attention tight. Todd talked the most, filling gaps with stories about expansion and new markets, the way some people filled gaps with laughter. His hands were always moving, fork, glass, napkin, confident, careless. He ate like he trusted the food. Lauren didn't. She pushed small bites around her plate and kept glancing toward Andrew like she was watching for permission to breathe. When she did eat, it was careful, slow, as if appetite could be interpreted as weakness. Jeff ate efficiently, head angled just slightly, as if listening to something beyond the room. His eyes kept sweeping the corners and the doorway, measuring distance and exits. Andrew tried to act normal, but Brianna could see the strain in the way he held his shoulders. He smiled at Todd's jokes. He answered Lauren's questions about schedules and reports, but every time a server approached his side of the table, his gaze flicked down to the plate first. Not fear, calculation. Brianna felt a cold respect for that. The first course disappeared. Plates were cleared with smooth professionalism. A faint, clean scent of citrus soap drifted in from the kitchen corridor, mixing with roasted herbs and warm bread. Todd dabbed his mouth with the napkin and leaned back. "So, Brianna," he said, voice bright with practiced interest. "Andrew says you're a food consultant. What exactly does that mean?" Brianna met his eyes and kept her smile small. "I help ensure quality and safety." Todd's eyebrows lifted. "That's fascinating. How does a person get into that line of work?" "My grandmother," Brianna said, keeping her words short. "She taught me about plants and herbs." Todd nodded slowly, gaze sharpening like a camera focusing. "Grandmother taught you. Interesting." Andrew cut in smoothly, voice calm. "Brianna has an eye for details most people miss." Todd's smile widened, but it didn't reach his eyes. Clearly, Lauren's fork paused midair for a fraction of a second. Brianna caught it. A tiny freeze. A subtle tell. Then Lauren continued eating as if nothing had happened. The main course arrived: roasted duck, glossy cherry sauce, vegetables arranged with quiet precision. The aroma hit the room first. Rich fat, sweet fruit, pepper, heat. Brianna's senses lit up automatically. She watched Andrew's plate settle in front of him and scanned it fast: color, steam, garnish, placement. Everything matched what she had seen in the kitchen. Still, she excused herself. "Just a moment," she said softly, rising. Andrew's eyes followed her, and she gave him the smallest nod. Routine, not panic. She moved through the corridor toward the kitchen, heels soft on the polished floor. The house felt quieter away from the table, like it had been holding its breath for the guests. In the kitchen, Marie was plating with the same controlled focus as before. Stainless counters gleamed. Knives clicked against cutting boards. A server waited at the pass, hands behind his back. Brianna stepped closer to check Andrew's plate at the source. That was when she heard a voice behind her. "Checking up on us?" "Lauren." Her tone was light enough to pass as a joke, but it landed like a blade. Brianna turned and found Lauren leaning against the doorway, arms crossed, expression composed. The overhead lights caught the smoothness of her hair and the tight set of her mouth. "Just doing my job," Brianna said. Lauren's gaze slid over Brianna's hands, then to the plated food, then back to her face. "Your job is what exactly? Making Andrew paranoid about his own dinner?" Brianna kept her voice even. "Making sure he stays healthy." Lauren's smile twitched. "He was healthy before you showed up." The lie was so clean it almost sounded like truth. Brianna held Lauren's gaze. "Andrew can decide what he needs." Lauren pushed off the doorway and stepped closer. The kitchen noise filled the space between them, water running, pans sizzling, a chef calling for plates, yet the air felt suddenly thin. "Can he enter?" Lauren asked softly. "Because from where I'm standing, he's letting a stranger into his life, into his home, based on one incident at a restaurant." Her eyes narrowed slightly. "That doesn't sound like the Andrew I know." Brianna felt the instinctive urge to defend herself, to explain, to justify. Justification was a gift. Lauren hadn't earned it. "I'm not here to replace anyone," Brianna said. Lauren's gaze dropped briefly to Brianna's dress. the fabric, the fit. Then it lifted again, sharper. Good, Lauren said. Because you won't. She reached forward without warning. Her fingers touched Brianna's wrist. Not gentle, not affectionate. A testing grip, like she was checking merchandise for flaws. Her thumb pressed the inside of Brianna's wrist, where the pulse beat visible. Brianna didn't pull away. She refused to give Lauren the satisfaction of flinching. Lauren's eyes held hers. "Remember your place," Lauren said quietly. Then she released Brianna's wrist and walked back toward the dining room as if she'd only stopped by for water. Brianna stood still for 2 breaths, feeling the faint pressure lingering on her skin like a bruise that hadn't formed yet. Marie's voice cut through, low and steady. "Trouble?" Brianna turned slightly. Marie's eyes were sharp, reading everything without needing it spelled out. "Not sure," Brianna said, "but she doesn't like me." Marie's mouth tightened. "That's not your concern. Food is." Brianna nodded once, grateful for the simplicity. She watched Andrew's plate again. Duck, sauce, vegetables. Nothing out of place. No new garnish. No suspicious sheen. The aroma was exactly what it should be. She carried the plate back herself, hands steady. In the dining room, the conversation was still flowing. Todd, describing a business trip and laughing at his own punchline. Jeff's eyes flicked up when Brianna returned, tracking the plate, then her face, then Lauren's. Brianna set the plate down in front of Andrew with careful precision. Andrew's eyes met hers for a brief moment. He saw it, not the full story, but the tension in her jaw, the alertness in her gaze. He didn't ask. He didn't make a scene. His hand moved to his fork with calm, but his posture shifted slightly, more guarded, more ready. Lauren didn't look at Brianna. She sipped water and stared at Andrew like the room belonged to her. Dessert came later, dark chocolate, bright berries, a thin ribbon of sauce on the plate. Coffee followed. Todd kept talking. Jeff stayed watchful. Lauren stayed composed. At 9:30, the guests began to leave. Todd shook Andrew's hand and clapped him on the shoulder. "Good to see you looking better," he said, smiling. "Whatever this new health kick is, keep it up." Lauren lingered, gathering papers as if she always needed to be useful. "I'll have those reports ready by Monday," she said. Then, quieter, leaning in toward Andrew. "And please consider what I said about the board meeting. They're getting restless." Andrew's smile didn't change, but his eyes cooled. "Noted." Jeff nodded once, murmured something about security, and followed Todd out. Finally, the front door shut. Silence poured into the house like water. Andrew loosened his tie with a slow exhale. That was exhausting. Brianna remained standing, arms loose at her sides, still feeling Lauren's fingers on her wrist like a mark. Andrew's gaze lifted to hers. Something happened. It wasn't a question. Brianna crossed the living room, keeping her voice low. "Lauren cornered me in the kitchen." Andrew's jaw tightened. "What did she say?" Brianna hesitated, then decided truth was safer than politeness. "She told me to remember my place." A faint, bitter laugh left Andrew's mouth. It held no humor. "She thinks she owns the air around me," Brianna added, words quiet but sharp. "And she's scared I'm taking something." Andrew rubbed a hand over his face, fatigue showing through the polished exterior. "Lauren has been with me 8 years. 8 years is enough time to build loyalty," Brianna said, "or something that looks like it." Andrew looked at her, eyes searching. "You don't trust her." Brianna didn't look away. "No." Andrew's shoulders sank slightly, as if that answer confirmed something he'd been resisting. "Neither do I," he admitted. "At least not the way I used to." He stood in the quiet room with the lights dimmed and the windows reflecting them back, 2 figures caught inside a house too large for safety. "This is my life now," Andrew said softly. Suspecting everyone, Brianna's voice steadied. "We'll be careful. We'll get proof." Andrew looked at her for a long moment, and in the silence between them, something shifted. Not romance. Not yet, but a fragile alignment. Trust. Forming under pressure. In the distance, somewhere deeper in the house, a security system beeped softly as a door latched. Brianna's skin prickled, because she realized something that made her stomach drop. Lauren hadn't just threatened her. Lauren had touched her pulse, like she was measuring how afraid Brianna could be. The next morning, Brianna woke before her alarm and lay still, listening. Their apartment always had a rhythm, pipes clicking as the building warmed. Distant footsteps in the hallway. Tyler's soft snore from the couch when he fell asleep studying. Today, those familiar sounds felt thinner, like something had slipped between them. She checked the lock twice before she left. Outside, the air had that early chill that made concrete smells sharper. She walked fast, scanning reflections in windows without looking like she was scanning. A black sedan idled at the corner, engine humming low. It pulled away when she passed, but her pulse didn't slow. Phil picked her up at 9. He didn't say much at first, but his eyes met hers in the rearview mirror like he could read tension the way other people read headlines. "You sleep?" he asked. "A little," Brianna said. Phil nodded. Like that was the honest answer he expected. Bennett Technologies rose out of the city like a clean blade glass. Steel. Security cameras that turned with quiet precision. The lobby smelled like polished stone and coffee that cost too much. A receptionist recognized Brianna immediately now and smiled too widely, eyes flicking toward the elevators as if gossip lived up there. Andrew's office was on a high floor with windows that looked down on the city like it was a model. He stood by the glass when Brianna arrived, phone at his ear, expression tight. The second he saw her, he ended the call. "Chin found something," he said. Brianna's stomach dropped and tightened at the same time. "What?" Andrew didn't gesture for her to sit. He stayed standing, like sitting would make it real. "Richard Carter," he said. The name sounded heavier in this room than it had at the dinner table. "My late wife's brother. He's been making deposits into his account. Large ones." Brianna kept her face calm. "From where?" "That's the problem," Andrew said. "We can't trace the source. 50,000 here, 20,000 there. Spread out like someone who knows how to keep patterns from forming." Brianna's mind moved fast. So either someone is paying him, or he's paying someone else. Andrew's eyes narrowed. "Exactly." He crossed to his desk and opened a folder. Paper receipts slid out, crisp and clean. Bank statements, dates highlighted, a pattern drawn in ink. Brianna's gaze tracked the dates. "How recent?" she asked. "Within the last year," Andrew said. "But here's the thing." His jaw tightened. "Richard lives in California. He hasn't been here in years." Brianna's breath slowed. Distance didn't clear him. Distance just changed the method. "If he's involved," she said carefully, "he can't do this alone." Andrew looked at her like she'd said the one sentence that finally made the room make sense. Chin said the same, he admitted. "If Richard is part of this, he's working with someone local." Brianna's mind flicked through faces the way it had flicked through plates. Todd's confident grin. Lauren's polished smile that didn't reach her eyes. Jeff's watchful silence. Even the chef's steady hands. Even the server's careful movements. "Someone who can reach your food," she said. Andrew's phone buzzed again. He ignored it. His eyes stayed locked on Brianna, searching for something that wasn't just strategy. "We need proof," he said. "Enough to hold up. Enough to end this." Brianna eased into the chair across from him, keeping her posture controlled. The office smelled faintly of clean paper and cold air conditioning, like comfort designed to keep emotion out. Over the past weeks, Andrew and Brianna had built a rhythm of work and quiet trust. He had told her things he didn't tell his board. She had told him things she'd never said out loud, how it felt to become a parent overnight, how grief could turn into bills and responsibility without warning. Today, the air between them felt tighter. "Can I ask you something personal?" Brianna said. Andrew's mouth lifted slightly, tired. "You've earned it." "What was Jennifer like?" Brianna asked. Andrew's gaze drifted past her, toward the city beyond the glass. For a moment, his face softened. "She was light," he said. The word landed gently. "She made everything feel possible, even when I was impossible." Brianna watched his throat move as he swallowed, emotion controlled but present. "You miss her?" Brianna said, quietly. "Every day," Andrew admitted. Then his mouth tightened. "And lately I've been thinking, I've been missing her wrong." Brianna didn't interrupt. "I've been trying to prove something," he continued, "that her belief in me wasn't wasted. So I worked, I built, I chased growth, and I forgot to live." Brianna's fingers curled lightly against her knee. "You're allowed to be happy," she said. Andrew gave a short, dry exhale. "You sound like my therapist." "You have a therapist?" "I stopped going," he said. "Thought I was fine." His eyes met hers. A flicker of humor, quickly drowned by honesty. "Turns out, I wasn't." Brianna held his gaze. "None of us are fine all the time. Some of us just hide it better." Andrew studied her for a moment. Then his expression shifted softer, more curious. "Why did you say yes?" he asked suddenly. "To the job, to helping me." Brianna didn't answer immediately. The easy answer was money. The real answer was heavier. "Because you said, please," she said finally. Andrew's face tightened, like the word struck a nerve. "And because when you looked at me," Brianna continued, voice steady, "you saw a person, not just someone carrying plates." Andrew didn't speak. He just listened. "I know what it feels like to be alone," Brianna added. "After my parents died, Tyler and I were invisible. People asked if we needed help, but it was always performance. You didn't perform. You needed help. And you admitted it. That mattered." Andrew's gaze dropped to his desk, then lifted again. He looked tired in a way that had nothing to do with sleep. "You're the first person in a long time who's been honest with me," he said. Brianna's phone buzzed softly in her bag. She ignored it. Andrew's phone buzzed again. He glanced at the screen, then set it down face up, as if refusing to be controlled by it. Then he leaned forward, elbows on the desk, expression serious again. "We don't have enough to confront anyone," he said. "Chin's digging, but it takes time." Brianna nodded once. "So, we control the next move." Andrew's eyes sharpened. "How?" Brianna's mind ran through the logistics like she was setting a table. Controlled environment, limited people, predictable routine. A moment where anyone trying to poison him would assume the window was open. "A public event won't work," she said. "Too many variables, too many hands. But a private setting, your estate, your inner circle." Andrew's jaw tightened. "A trap." "A trap." Brianna held his gaze. "A test. We don't accuse. We observe. We build evidence." Andrew stared at her for a long beat, weighing risk against necessity. The hum of the building's ventilation filled the silence like distant surf. Then his office door opened without a knock. A man stepped in with the calm posture of someone who had been trained to walk into danger without announcing fear. Mid-40s, crisp suit, eyes that missed nothing. Robert Chin. He nodded once to Andrew, then to Brianna, acknowledging her as part of the room's reality now. Sorry to interrupt, Chin said, but you need to see this. He placed a tablet on Andrew's desk and tapped the screen. A photo filled it, grainy but clear enough. Richard Carter, in an airport, head turned slightly, jaw clenched. A timestamp in the corner. The date was circled in red. Brianna's breath caught as her eyes snapped to the timestamp, because it didn't match Andrew's assumption about distance, and Chin's next sentence landed like a door slamming shut. Richard has been in this city, he said quietly, more than once. The museum gala smelled like champagne and varnished wood. Every surface gleamed under warm lights, glass cases, polished marble floors, gold frames around art that felt too expensive to be looked at by anyone who wasn't wearing a watch worth a car. Music drifted through the rooms in soft, controlled notes, just loud enough to feel elegant, just quiet enough to hear private conversations. Brianna stayed close to Andrew, without clinging. Her maroon dress moved cleanly when she walked, the fabric whispering against her legs. She kept one hand free, the other lightly resting at Andrew's elbow when needed. A gesture that looked like intimacy to outsiders and like positioning to her. Andrew introduced her simply as Brianna Mitchell, not consultant, not employee. The word friend didn't get spoken, but it lived in the way he said her name, steady, clear, as if he wanted people to remember it. People smiled and nodded and assessed her the way they assessed art, quickly, critically, deciding if she belonged. Brianna kept her face calm and her eyes sharp. Across the room, a group of investors laughed too loudly. A woman in diamonds raised her glass and complimented Andrew's resilience. Someone mentioned the board. Someone else mentioned a new acquisition. Every sentence carried an invisible price tag. Andrew played the role perfectly. His smile was practiced. His posture was composed. But Brianna saw the tiny shifts, how his gaze checked exits, how his shoulders tightened whenever a server passed too close. She understood something then. He wasn't just afraid of poison. He was afraid of not knowing which smile was the knife. They moved through the gala like a tide, stopping at clusters of people, exchanging polite lines, shaking hands that felt damp and too eager. Cameras flashed occasionally. The pop of light made Brianna's skin prickle each time. She hated the idea of being recorded without permission, but she also understood its usefulness. Proof had its own kind of power. Andrew leaned close once, voice low. "You okay?" Brianna nodded. "Just watching." Andrew's mouth twitched. "That's what I brought you for." It sounded like a joke, but his eyes stayed serious. They had just finished speaking to a museum board member when a man appeared at Andrew's shoulder like he'd stepped out of the shadows. Robert Chin. He wore a suit that blended into crowds and eyes that didn't. His expression was calm, but it carried urgency like a heartbeat under skin. "We need to talk," Chin said quietly. Andrew's smile didn't change. "Privately?" Chin nodded once. Andrew excused them with an easy line and guided Brianna toward a quieter corner near a sculpture gallery where the light was dimmer and the sound softened. A tall metal sculpture loomed beside them, cold and abstract. Chin pulled out his phone and angled it so only they could see. "I've been tracking Richard Carter," he said. 3 months ago, he made 2 trips to this city. Short visits, 1 or 2 days. Budget hotels, paid cash. Andrew's face went still. "Who did he meet?" "Still working on that," Chin said. "But here's what matters." He swiped to another screen. "Both trips lined up with dates you reported feeling especially ill after eating at Azure Heights." Brianna's stomach tightened. a pattern that clean wasn't coincidence. Andrew's hand closed into a fist briefly, then opened again. So Richard is involved. It looks that way, Chin said. But he can't do this alone. Not from California. Someone here has to be feeding him access. Chin swiped again. A series of photos appeared, taken from a distance. Lauren Webb sat at a coffee shop table downtown, posture rigid, face angled away. Across from her sat a man in his 30s with sharp features and cold eyes. The lighting caught the side of his face like a blade. In one photo, his hand passed an envelope across the table. In another, Lauren's fingers closed around it fast, like she'd been waiting for it. Brianna's skin went cold. Andrew's voice dropped. Who is he? Not sure yet, Chin admitted. Running facial recognition, checking phone records. But I wanted you to see this now. Andrew stared at the photo as if he could burn answers into it. Lauren, the name came out flat, but Brianna heard the fracture underneath. Brianna leaned in closer, eyes scanning details. The envelope, the timestamp in the corner of the photo, the location tag Chin had added. Proof layered on proof. We need to set a trap, Brianna said. Both men looked at her. She kept her voice steady, clear enough to cut through fear. If Lauren is involved and Richard is feeding the plan, Brianna continued, we can't keep waiting for luck. We need to control the environment. Give them a window they can't resist. Andrew's gaze sharpened. You want to use me as bait. I want to catch them in the act, Brianna corrected. So there's no doubt. No spinning it. No stress as explanation. No missing proof. Chin nodded slowly, approval tightening his face. She's right. We do it at your estate. Small guest list. Only people you claim you trust. Andrew's jaw clenched. And if they try again? Brianna's eyes held his. Then we stop it. Because this time, we're watching every hand. Chin's phone buzzed in his palm. He checked it, then looked up, voice lower. They're texting each other, he said. Lauren and someone saved in her phone under a fake name. We can't get full content yet, but we have timestamps. Andrew's breath came out slow. Okay, he said. The words sounded like surrender and decision at the same time. We do it. He turned to Brianna, eyes intense. But if it gets dangerous, you leave. Brianna didn't blink. I'm not leaving. Andrew's lips parted, as if he wanted to argue, then closed. His gaze softened for a fraction, something warm, pushing through fear. Chin cleared his throat lightly. Not awkward, just practical. We'll need cameras, kitchen coverage, wine station coverage, staff vetted, chain of custody on everything. Brianna nodded. And if anyone leaves the table, someone follows. Andrew's shoulders tightened as if the plan was already pressing down on him. The gala noise swelled around them, laughter, clinking glasses, music rising into a brighter rhythm. The room looked peaceful, expensive, safe. None of it felt safe. Andrew exhaled and stepped back into the crowd, with his billionaire smile back in place, as if he could put danger in his pocket and wear charm over it. Brianna stayed beside him, scanning faces. Every person holding a champagne flute suddenly looked like they could be holding something else. When the event finally ended, Andrew's car waited outside in the cool night air. The city smelled faintly of rain and exhaust. A camera flash popped across the street, someone catching Andrew's departure. Inside the car, the silence was heavier than the music inside the museum. Andrew stared out the window, jaw tight. Are you sure you want to do this? He asked quietly. Brianna's eyes stayed forward, watching the road lights blur past. Are you? Andrew's hands rested on his knees, fingers flexing once. I'm sure I want it to end. He turned his head toward her. The streetlights slid over his face, highlighting the tiredness he tried to hide. "And I'm sure I don't want you hurt," he added. Brianna's throat tightened. She kept her voice calm anyway. "Then we do it right. Proof. Cameras. No mistakes." Andrew held her gaze for a long beat. Then his hand moved slowly, carefully, until it covered hers on the seat between them. His palm was warm. It wasn't a romantic gesture. It was an anchor. "Thank you," he said quietly. Brianna's fingers curled slightly beneath his. "We'll finish this." When the car stopped at her building, Andrew didn't release her hand right away. The city outside was dark and ordinary. Her apartment window glowed faintly above them. "We announce the dinner tomorrow," Andrew said. "Chin sets everything." Brianna nodded once. "And we watch every pore." Andrew's thumb pressed lightly against her knuckles. Then he let go. Brianna stepped out into the night air and watched the car pull away. Upstairs, Tyler waited on the couch, worry written in the slump of his shoulders. "How was it?" he asked. Brianna swallowed. Her mouth tasted faintly like champagne fumes she hadn't drank. "Beautiful," she said. Then, more honestly, "terrifying." Tyler's eyes widened. "That bad?" Brianna nodded. "We're setting a trap." Tyler sat up straighter. "Bree, I know." Brianna cut in gently. "I know what it sounds like." Tyler rubbed his face, frustration and fear mixing. "Maybe you should let the police handle it." "We need proof first," Brianna said, voice steady. "That's what the trap is." Tyler stared at her for a long moment. Then his voice softened. "You care about him." Brianna didn't answer immediately. She didn't need to. The silence did it for her. And as she went to her room and shut the door, one thought stayed sharp and unavoidable. If someone had been willing to poison Andrew in public for months, they wouldn't stop just because Brianna had noticed. They would adapt, and the next attempt would be cleaner. The estate felt different when it was weaponized. Not warmer, not safer, just sharper. Every corner suddenly a place someone could hide. Intent, every polished surface, a place that could reflect a hand moving where it shouldn't. The air smelled faintly of lemon cleanser and something metallic from the security equipment Chin's team had installed. Brianna arrived early in a green dress that didn't restrict her stride. Her shoes were quiet. Her hair was pinned back. Nothing loose to grab. Nothing that could snag if she had to move fast. In the kitchen, Marie worked with the calm of someone who refused to let fear contaminate her hands. Ingredients were laid out like a map, sealed containers, labeled bottles, herbs in neat bundles. Chin stood at the counter with a small camera rig, checking angles. Two uniformed security staff waited by the service hallway, earpieces visible, faces blank. Chin held up a clear evidence bag with a printed label. "Chain of custody starts now," he said, voice low but firm. "Every ingredient that touches Mr. Bennett's plate gets logged." Marie slid a sealed spice tin toward Brianna. "Check it," she said. Brianna examined the seal. Smooth, unbroken. She held it closer, watching how the light caught the plastic wrap. No tear marks, no reheat wrinkles. Chin stamped the log sheet with a handheld time stamper. The stamp hit paper with a dull, final thud. 8 minutes past 6. He wrote Marie's name, his own, then looked at Brianna. Initial. Brianna took the pen and signed, feeling the strange weight of her own handwriting becoming evidence. A staff member brought in the wine for the evening, 2 bottles, still boxed. Chin stopped them at the threshold like a traffic cop. "Open it here," he ordered. The staff member hesitated, then obeyed. The cardboard flaps made a dry, ripping sound. The bottlenecks emerged. Chin photographed the labels, then stamped the log again. 6:14. Brianna watched the wine like it was a living thing. A poisoner didn't need the kitchen anymore. They needed one brief touch at the right moment. Chin placed a small security seal over the cork and pressed it down firmly. "If this breaks, we know," he said. Brianna nodded. Her mouth was dry. Marie glanced at her, eyes steady. "You're shaking," she observed. Brianna looked down and realized her fingers were trembling slightly. She curled them into a fist and forced them still. "Adrenaline," she said. Marie's voice stayed calm. "Use it." At 7, the guests arrived. Todd came first, loud and cheerful, wearing confidence like cologne. "Big night," he joked, stepping inside and scanning the room like he was inspecting property. "You got the whole place on lockdown?" Jeff followed close behind him, eyes catching the extra security immediately. A faint lift of his brow was the only reaction he allowed. "Didn't know we were doing a drill," he said, tone dry. Lauren arrived last. She moved smoothly, dressed in black, hair perfect, smile polite enough to fool strangers. But Brianna saw the tension in her jaw, the way her gaze flicked toward Andrew's side of the room like it had a magnetic pull. "Andrew," Lauren said warmly, as if nothing had ever sharpened between them. "This is intimate by design," Andrew replied, voice calm. He looked composed tonight, controlled, almost too controlled. Brianna noticed the way his hand lingered a second on the back of a chair, grounding himself. They took their seats. Brianna positioned herself where she could see Lauren's hands, Todd's posture, Jeff's line of sight. Andrew sat at the head of the table. The windows behind him reflected the room faintly, making it look like there were twice as many people watching. The first course arrived simple, clean, plated in front of Brianna's eyes. Brianna gave Andrew a subtle nod before he lifted his fork. Todd talked through bites, laughing. Jeff listened, gaze moving. Lauren ate small amounts, her attention drifting toward the wine station area as if she could see through walls. Brianna's senses stayed high. She tracked the server's steps, noted which tray went where, which glass was closest to Andrew's right hand. Second course. Still clean. The room warmed slightly with conversation, and that was the danger comfort made people sloppy. Lauren's napkin moved to her lap. Her chair scraped softly. "I'll be right back," she said, voice light. "Restroom." Brianna's spine tightened. Andrew didn't react outwardly. His eyes flicked once toward Brianna, just enough for her to understand. Now, a soft vibration tapped Andrew's collar. Chin's voice came through his hidden earpiece so low it barely moved Andrew's expression. "She's not heading to the restroom. She's in the kitchen corridor." Andrew's fork paused mid-air for half a second. Then he set it down like it was a normal pause. "Brianna," he said calmly, "could you help me with something in my study? There's a document I need you to look at." Brianna pushed her chair back smoothly. "Of course." Todd blinked. "During dinner?" Andrew smiled without warmth. "It'll take a minute." They walked out together, steps steady, not rushed. The hallway light was cooler, cleaner, and it made the silence feel louder. Once they turned the corner, Andrew's voice dropped. "Chin says she passed something to a server." Brianna's mind snapped into focus. "The wine," she said immediately. Andrew's jaw tightened. "Chin's following him." Brianna's breath came fast but controlled. "She's aiming for a public collapse," she said. "Make it look natural." Andrew's eyes flicked to her face, sharp. Just like Brianna didn't let him finish. She didn't want that name in the air, unless it had to be. They turned back toward the dining room. Brianna heard it before she saw it. The soft glug of wine being poured, the faint clink of crystal, the polite murmur of a server's voice. They entered the doorway just as the server reached Andrew's place. Andrew's glass already held dark red liquid. The server lifted the bottle again, angling it slightly, hand hovering close to Andrew's rim. Brianna's eyes locked on the server's fingers. A tiny movement too small for most people, but Brianna saw it. The slight curl of his thumb, the subtle shift of his grip, a pause that didn't belong. Actually, Andrew said smoothly, voice even, I'd prefer water tonight. Could you take this away? The server froze, not long enough to be obvious, just long enough to confirm it. His gaze flicked to Lauren. Lauren's face had gone pale, lips parted, as if she'd forgotten how to breathe. Brianna's skin turned ice cold. Don't, Jeff said sharply. He stood so fast his chair legs scraped loudly against the floor. The server's hand hovered over Andrew's glass. Jeff's voice cut through the room like a siren. Don't touch that glass. Silence slammed down. Todd's smile evaporated. Jeff. What the hell? Jeff didn't look at him. Jeff's eyes stayed on the server's hand. Step back, he ordered. The server swallowed. His fingers tightened around the stem. Brianna's pulse hammered in her throat. A door opened behind them. Chin entered with 2 security staff, moving fast and controlled. One of them held a small camera pointed straight at the table, red recording light blinking. Chin's voice was calm and loud enough for everyone to hear. Lauren Webb, he said, we have you on video passing a substance to this server with instructions to put it into Mr. Bennett's wine. Lauren's chair scraped back as she stood, shaking. No. Chin lifted a sealed clear evidence bag. Inside was a tiny vial, capped tight. He held it up so the light caught it. Recovered from the wine station, he continued. Collected at 7:42. Logged. Signed. Sealed. He nodded to the camera. Timestamp is on record. The security staff moved toward Lauren. The server tried to step away, but another guard blocked him. Lauren's eyes snapped to Andrew, wild and furious. You deserved it, she whispered. Andrew's face went white. Todd stared at her like he couldn't recognize the person he'd been eating dinner with. Brianna didn't move. She just watched Lauren's mouth form the next words before they came out. You killed Jennifer, Lauren said, voice cracking with something that sounded like grief and poison mixed together. The room held its breath. Andrew's lips parted, but no sound came. And Brianna realized, in the cold center of that silence, that this wasn't just about money or power. This was about vengeance, dressed up as love, and it was finally bleeding into the open. The house stayed quiet after the shouting ended. Not peaceful quiet in the way a room goes silent after glass breaks, when everyone is waiting to see what else will fall. The security team moved with clipped efficiency. The server was guided out first, wrists restrained, eyes wide, and pleading at no one in particular. Lauren followed, her shoulders shaking, mascara tracking down her face in dark lines that made her look less polished and more human. Todd sat frozen at the table like someone had unplugged him. Jeff stood near Andrew's chair, body angled outward, shielding without touching. Chin spoke in short bursts names, times, instructions, his voice carrying that practiced calm that didn't ask permission for reality. Brianna watched Andrew. He didn't chase Lauren. He didn't yell. He didn't collapse. He just stood there with one hand on the back of his chair, as if it was the only thing keeping him upright. His eyes were fixed on a point in the middle distance, unfocused, like his mind had left his body to avoid feeling everything at once. Chin approached with a clipboard and a sealed evidence pouch. Mr. Bennett, he said, measured. We need your statement while everything is fresh. Andrew blinked once. Slow. Do it, he said, voice flat. The pen scratched against paper. The timestamper hit the page again hard, definitive. Chin narrated each step for the camera. Who handled the vial, where it was recovered, when it was sealed. A chain built in real time, link by link, so no one could claim later that the truth had been invented. Brianna signed again when asked, hand steady, despite the tremor under her skin. Todd finally found his voice. Andrew, I. His eyes darted to the doorway where Lauren had disappeared. All this time, Andrew didn't look at him. Go home, Todd, he said quietly. Todd hesitated, then stood, chair scraping, and left without another word. His footsteps faded down the hallway, swallowed by the mansion's expensive silence. When the last police car's lights stopped flashing outside, when the front door shut and stayed shut, the estate felt too large for two people. Andrew walked to his office without saying anything. Brianna followed at a respectful distance, letting him choose the pace. The hallway lights cast long shadows across clean walls. Every framed photo they passed felt like a witness. In the office, Andrew stopped at the desk, where a photo frame sat angled toward him. Jennifer's smile glowed softly in the lamplight, bright, unknowing, untouched by everything that had been done in her name. Andrew's throat worked. His fingers hovered over the frame, then gripped it carefully, like it might shatter if he held too tight. She said I killed her, he whispered. Brianna stepped closer, slow. She needed you to be the villain, Brianna said, so she could call it justice. Andrew's breath hitched. What if she's right? What if? He swallowed hard. What if I missed signs? What if I was too busy? And she, no, Brianna said, sharper than she intended. She softened immediately, but she didn't take the word back. Andrew, stop. He turned toward her, eyes wet now, the composure gone. For the first time since she'd met him, he looked like a man who didn't know how to hold his own weight. Brianna closed the space between them and took his hands. His skin was cold. You didn't kill your wife, she said, voice steady, low. A heart condition killed her. Grief and obsession killed what came after. Andrew's shoulders trembled once, like a body trying to decide whether it was safe to fall apart. How can you be sure? He asked, broken. Brianna lifted one of his hands and pressed it against her own pulse at her wrist, the same place Lauren had gripped the night before. Because I know what real care feels like, she said. It feels like this. It's steady. It doesn't punish. It doesn't keep score. Andrew's eyes squeezed shut. A tear slipped down his cheek, then another. He exhaled like he'd been holding his breath for months and couldn't remember when it started. Brianna pulled him into her arms. He resisted for half a second, pride trying to hold him up. Then he gave in. His forehead pressed against her shoulder. His hands curled into the fabric of her dress like a lifeline. The sound he made wasn't dramatic. It was quiet, raw, the kind of grief that had nowhere left to go. Brianna held him and let him shake. The clock on the wall ticked. Outside the window, the garden lights glowed faintly against the night. Somewhere downstairs, a security system beeped softly as a door locked. When Andrew finally pulled back, his eyes were red and exhausted. He stared at Brianna like he couldn't decide whether to apologize or thank her. Thank you, he said instead. Brianna nodded once. You're safe, she replied. That's what matters. Andrew looked past her shoulder toward the hallway, as if expecting someone else to appear and prove this was still a nightmare. When no one did, his posture loosened slightly. It's over, he said, voice hoarse. It's finally over. Brianna didn't correct him. Not yet. Endings didn't land clean in real life. They landed like dust, slow, settling, coating everything. Chin called 20 minutes later. Andrew put it on speaker. Richard Carter has been located, Chin said. He tried to run after hearing about Lauren. Airport. We have him in custody. Extradition process starts now. Andrew closed his eyes. His hand went to the edge of the desk, gripping. "Okay," he whispered. When the call ended, Andrew stayed still for a long moment, then turned and looked at Brianna. "I don't know how to live without watching my back." Brianna's voice stayed gentle. "You learn, slowly, with time." Andrew swallowed. "And therapy," he added, a faint, humorless smile flashing. "And therapy," Brianna agreed. A quieter hunger surfaced in the silence between them. Not for food, not for revenge, for something normal, something safe. Brianna glanced toward the doorway. "Marie saved dessert," she said. Andrew blinked. "Dessert? Chocolate cake?" Brianna said. "And strawberries." Andrew let out a breath that almost sounded like a laugh. "Lead the way." In the kitchen, the counters were clean again, the tension scrubbed away by staff and procedure. A small plate waited under a glass cover. When Brianna lifted it, the smell of chocolate rose warm and honest. Uncomplicated. They sat at the island like two people who'd survived something and didn't know what to say about it yet. Andrew took a bite and closed his eyes briefly, like he was trying to remember what simple pleasure felt like. "This is nice," he admitted. "Safe tastes different," Brianna said, watching him carefully. "When you've earned it." Andrew opened his eyes and looked at her. His gaze was steady now, tired but clear. "I meant what I said earlier," he murmured, "about wanting to take you to dinner. Not as my consultant, not as someone fixing my life. Just dinner." Brianna's chest tightened, not from fear this time, but from the weight of being seen. "I'd like that," she said softly. Andrew's mouth curved into the smallest real smile. "Good." They ate in silence after that, not awkward quiet in a way that felt earned. Outside, the estate lights continued to glow. Inside, the danger had finally been named, stamped, sealed, and removed. Brianna watched Andrew take another bite, slower this time. He wasn't looking over his shoulder anymore, not for the first time in months, and in that calm, Brianna understood the final shape of the justice she'd fought for. Not vengeance, relief.